don't forget. Perfect. Yeah.
Okay. The estimating mistakes costing pool builders money.
Yeah. So when we start, I'll just do you want to just kind of start and kick
Yeah,
things off? Is that how? Okay.
I will introduce people. We're at 81 right now,
How many do
which
you
is great.
typically have on these?
This is the first time we've done it in 3 years.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And just in case this goes into our library because we didn't have time to edit this part out. Hi, thanks for watching online. This
Yeah.
this is the practice session. I promise you, it's not just us. So
Right.
give it one
That's so
moment.
exciting then.
Mhm.
Pressure's on. We got to make this one a good one.
254 registrants, 88 so far, so 89
Yeah,
and counting.
that's great.
All right, you ready?
I think so. When we start it, let's just ask them to tell us where they're tuning in from, maybe, so that we can see the chat with their cities and
Okay,
let's do
sounds
it.
good.
Right.
Welcome, everybody. Now, there are a lot of people that are still on their way into this session. My name is Eric Knight with Watershape University, and we have a very special guest, Dr. Anna Hunter from JobTread. Now, before getting into this, this is the first time that we have done a webinar with Watershape in over 2 years. I'm the executive director at Watershape University. I wanted to resurrect these. Honestly, I have no idea what I'm doing. I've done countless webinars in my life. I've never once hosted one. So if there was an issue with you getting the automated email, it sounds like most of you have received it now. So that's awesome. Thanks for being here. If if you had any issues with this, just let us know. There should have been an email in the invitation that was automated. Before getting into this and introducing Dr. Hunter, I wanted to let you know kind of the purpose of this. So, we are a higher education outfit. I think most of you probably know what Watershape U is. And one of the things that I thought would be very valuable is to have experts talk about things that we don't talk about in these big classes, or at least we don't have time to get into the depth because we are not subject matter experts on those. If you want to talk about concrete pool construction, for instance, we got you. But in terms of things like this, like construction software and very specialty things, we're going to have a special guest, maybe not every single week, but we have a we're going to do this from April through the end of August. So it's going to be through the summertime. It's always going to be at the same time, Wednesday webinars. It's always going to be 12 o'clock Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific for 1 hour. Ask them anything. These are experts. We may not have one every single week, like July 4th week, we're not going to have one. But like next week, we've got Bob Roman talking about fire features. And they lead Fire by Design. So they do fire features and how you can put them in bowls and you can put them in trenches, things like that. Like just little nuggets of value that can help you in the outdoor living space, whether you're a service pro or a contractor, it doesn't matter. We just want to bring experts in front of you, and that's what this is all about. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Our website is watershape.org, and you can follow us on social media. If you're not on our email list, make sure you ask to be on it. Go to our website and sign up, and just reach out through social media. That's how you can be updated on these as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Anna Hunter. We also have her coworker, Rachel Booth, who's going to be helping out with the Q&A because I certainly don't know how to answer these questions. But that being said, sorry, Anna, you're up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This is such a fun opportunity to be able to kick this off with all of you. And I'm just eager and excited to see all of you who are ready to enhance your estimating processes. Whether you charge for estimates or not, the estimating process can really eat away so much time, energy, and money in your companies. And so we really have to think about how much resources are being kind of allocated or dedicated to your estimating and selections processes. So this is really exciting to be able to kind of go through all of this with you all and to get you to the point where you're starting to really think about where are those profit losses during the estimating process. So let's just dive right in. And I like to start with something that might be a little bit uncomfortable. It is really that hard truth. And so when we think about profit loss, it's not usually due to a big catastrophe that happens or because something went way awry in one of your jobs, right? It's typically because we have these little small leaks across our projects that are now causing huge profit loss, and we might not know where they're coming from. They tend to kind of be a little invisible. So I think it's really important that we look at the estimating process because our estimates might look complete, but they might still fail for us. So I think it's really good to start getting realistic and to dig deeper into this. So the question really becomes, where are those leaks actually happening? So we need to ask ourselves those tough questions to get to the root of the issue. Do you track your estimates versus actuals on every single job? Do you know what your margins were from your last 3 projects? I don't know, do you? And then also, have you accounted for all of the forms of contingencies that might happen during a project while you're in the estimating phase when you can get ahead of it? So the whole goal here is to be proactive rather than reactive. And so a question that I have for you is, what are the most common issues that prevent your jobs from hitting your target profit margins? Well, there are 2 main reasons why job-based businesses fail to meet your profit margins. One is that you might misbid the job, and the other is you're misrunning the job. So we're going to dive into both here today. So let's zoom out before we zoom in here and really look at one of the main things that I see a lot of our pool builders and all contractors miss is the opportunity to have clear, consistent processes. So most builders just focus on the estimate creation phase. And they're like, okay, as long as I can create an estimate, get the numbers on paper, get a proposal in my customer's hands, I'm doing good. Well, what they're not really thinking about is the bigger picture here. When you only focus on a part of the system, that's really where those mistakes creep in. So we have to take into account the entire picture and really kind of consider all of the complexities that are involved in estimating even project management, because that does impact the estimating process, especially in future jobs. We also have to take into account feedback loops. For example, on this process map that I have here, there's a feedback loop. When you send the proposal to the customer and then they ask for some changes to be made, that's a loop. Now you're going back into proposal creation, and you really need to make sure that you have a process for that so you're not missing out on margins when you're doing those adjustments. And then also, it's important that we consider the coordination of this. Who does what in your company? Who is a part of each step of the process, and who's really the responsible party for each step? When you create some sort of a map like this, it gets all of your process out of your head and onto paper. Now, one of my favorite things is process mapping and figuring out how we get from point A to point Z in the most efficient and effective way. But also, how do we get it out of our heads and onto paper so that we can actually take a look at our processes from a big picture perspective and also getting into those details. And then we can identify gaps and redundancies and areas where we might need a little bit more attention. So in order for you to truly assess your estimating process, you need to map it out. So what I would encourage you to do, the first step of everything, is to map out your estimating process, similar to what you see on the screen here. What are every single step that is taken throughout the process? How do they work together, and who does what? Now we can actually have something to use and to assess as we move forward. Now, I also want to break this down into the most common mistakes that I see across hundreds of pool builders. Here at JobTread, I lead the learning and development department. So we are training JobTread contractors every single day on how to effectively manage their businesses, but also how to use a tool to help them manage their businesses. So we get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly every day here. And so I'm going to share with you some of these mistakes that I often see contractors making, especially pool builders specifically, as you're moving forward in your projects so that we can try to avoid those. The first mistake that I see is rushing the estimate. So picture this. You have been building pools for over 10 years. You know what you're doing. You've done maybe hundreds, maybe even thousands of pool builds during your time. And maybe it's, you got a new lead come in and you were going to be building that estimate for them, but you've worked a full day and now you're sitting at your house at 10, maybe 11 p.m., and you're trying to crank out an estimate. So, what we often do is we fall into autopilot, or we just kind of rely on our experience or our memory to build out our estimates. And that can often lead to us missing things. So, yes, I trust that you know what you're doing in your work, and that's awesome. But also, it's good for us to have some stopgaps to make sure that we don't miss small things that can truly eat away at our profits. So, when we look into creating our estimates, we have to kind of think of it in more of a step-by-step phased estimating process. So the first step to this phase is structure. So this is like our skeleton for our estimate. We can use these rigid, pre-established cost groups, cost codes, cost items, and they're almost like templates that are listing out all of the basic needs for a project, for a pool build, right? So this is really great. It's a template, it gets us started. But if we stick with just that, we're going to be missing all the nuances to this specific pool build that we have to estimate. So the next layer is developing the core scope. So for this particular pool build with this particular customer now, how do we adjust that basic template and actually make it more fitting for this particular build? Now, during the core scope level, we're going to really be thinking about in the most optimal prime conditions, when the weather's perfect, when they don't have any slope in their yard, when we have full access to their backyard. What are the perfect conditions, ideal state for building a pool? That's your core scope. Then we're going to get into site-specific adjustments. So after you get that core scope down for what that particular project needs, now we start considering all the nuances for that project. So this is really where it hits. It's the most crucial step of this whole process, because when you're losing your profits throughout a project, it's typically because of the nuances to that property, that customer, or that's just the project altogether. So stop and ask yourself, how does this specific backyard break my perfect pool build? Okay, what are the areas that I truly need to pay attention to for this one? So this makes us really account for narrow gates in their fences, right? Or extra plumbing lines to navigate around a tree, for example. So really thinking about what are the complicated pieces to this project that now I should be accounting for. The final step of the estimating process here is the risk and contingency. What are those unique challenges or potential overruns that we may run into with this particular project? You know, there could very well be a different type of soil on this project because maybe it was built in a newer development and they just dumped a bunch of soil in this development and filled a hole in order to build these houses. And now we don't know what's underneath there, right? So there's so many contingency pieces that we have to be mindful of. Now, we're not going to know all of them, but proper planning for contingencies is really important. So I highly recommend you to think about your estimating process as not just a single, I'm going to build an estimate now. No, you're going to be building your estimate in layers and phases. So start with the template, and templates are awesome. They give you that head start. They give you that boost. Then you're going to design that particular pool for the perfect conditions. And now we take it to that next step and do adjustments based on the site or even the customer's needs. And then we go into our risk and contingency phase. Now, the goal here is not to slow down your estimating process. It's to remove the need to think from scratch so you're not missing anything. And then we can move through these layers methodically, and it becomes kind of that safety net and really kind of helps us catch those blind spots. Now, because estimating isn't just about speed, it's also about completeness and consistency. And so we need to also make sure that we are not having any pricing confusion as we are building our estimates for our projects. Now, our founder and CEO here, Eric Fortenberry, he had taken over a construction company prior to starting JobTread. And he found that at that company, they were losing profit like crazy. And half of the company employees were pricing jobs based on markup, and half of them were pricing their jobs based on margin. hopefully you see where the problem is there. If you are going to want a 30% margin, profit margin on your projects, you can't mark up your materials or your labor by 30% because that's not equitable. What you need to do is to get at that 30% profit margin, you actually need to mark up your projects by 43%. The math is just different. They use different formulas. So markup just adds a percentage to the cost, whereas margin really takes into account the amount of the additional profit that you want. So it's really kind of looking at it from a profit first perspective versus adding to a cost perspective. Now, if you wanted to dive in here deeper, I highly encourage you to do so. We do have a blog on the JobTread website that you can look at and help you understand the difference between markup and margin. But let me tell you, if you're pricing all your jobs using markup right now, you could probably switch to that same percentage to get your margin, your targeted margin, and you probably won't see a difference in your sales. So let's say that you are aiming for that 30% margin, but you're only marking up your projects by, I don't know, by 30%, then you can move to marking up your projects by 43% and actually probably not see a difference in your sales. So that would be a good thing. You might be leaving money on the table. I also highly encourage you using margin because it's really the most trackable way that we can make sure that our jobs are making the profit that we're looking for. You can set a business goal based on your profit margins. It's also a lot more reliable and accurate, and you can have margins across your job. Create target margins for labor, materials, for your subcontractor. And so that really helps you to then track all of your job progress and your effectiveness against that margin amount. And then also the gross profit is a standard measure of performance. In fact, this is what's on your income statement. And so this really gives you even more insight into the performance and effectiveness of your projects. So even though you might get your math right, you also may not be accounting for all of the different costs in your project. And so that's where it comes into all of the breakdown of essential costs. Now, contractors easily consider all the hard costs that are involved in your projects. Yes, but we need to actually get smarter in accounting for all of the costs, including those additional costs that may arise. So hard costs include things like your pricing, your materials, and your labor. That's great. You can use cost catalogs or a pricing sheet for that. That's awesome. That gives you a starting point. But then in order to calculate those labor costs, I highly encourage you to remember to include burdened hourly rate, not just how much you pay them on their paycheck, but you have to make sure that hourly wages are included in addition to the benefits and taxes that you're paying out for each of your employees. So if you do have W-2 employees, make sure that you're accounting for the burdened hourly rate, not just what you pay them on their paycheck when you're estimating their hourly time for the projects. Additionally, when you collect subcontractor bids or trade partner bids, always make sure that you're as detailed as possible, that the contractor truly understands exactly what's expected of that project, so they're not going to underbid and then suddenly you have an issue later in the project. Also, make sure that you tack on an appropriate margin on top of those. And we're going to talk about subcontractors here again very soon. Also, determine those equipment costs. Now, for pool builds, you're using tons of equipment, especially for excavation. And so it's really important that you consider not just the time that you expect it will take to do that work, but also we need to rent that equipment a little bit longer just in case there are weather delays or in case, let's say, the customer goes out of town and doesn't want you in their backyard. And so how can you make sure that you have a little bit of buffer room on your timeline when you're renting equipment? And also, if you're owning equipment, account for that wear and tear. Make sure that that's a part of the entire amount that you're charging. Let's talk a little bit about additional costs. So we have our allowances for selections. That's great. So if you're going to want that contract signed by the customer right away, tack in allowance amounts that your customer can then eat against later when they are making their selections. That then gets that contract signed right away, but now you have a bucketed amount that your customer can count on, and that will kind of help you to be able to move forward in the project. Now, I also really want to mention here, if you're going to be using allowances, make sure that it's clear to the customer that you're going to collect an additional fee for any overage. So if you give your customer a $10,000 allowance for specific materials, let's say lighting, then when they make their selections and they actually select $12,000 worth, then you want to get that margin from that additional $2,000 because that is more processing time for your team. It's more installation time for your team. And there's a lot of additional considerations there. This especially is true if your customer chooses a higher end product that you didn't account for. Now you have to care for that product differently. Maybe the installation is a little bit more nitpicky. So make sure that you're collecting a margin on any overages with your allowances and selections. Then we go into contingencies. So this is the amount of money that you are setting aside so that in case there's something unexpected that happens, your customer is not scared or like thrown off by that. And so usually this is between 5 to 15% of a contingency amount. Some people present this as an allowance for their customers so that their customer can feel more comfortable with it, where it's just a line item on the estimate that says, hey, we're going to add in this contingency allowance. So if something happens, you're prepared for it. But if nothing happens, if we don't run into anything, and this is a perfect linear job, then you won't be paying for this contingency allowance amount. So
One
that's
second
definitely
here.
an option.
Anna, we have a question here, and I think it's
Yeah,
important to ask it during this. This comes from
perfect.
Martin, and Martin asks, that's a good question. Do you create allowances on min, mid, or max cost? What about contingencies? What is a good metric for determining that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we have to think about the psychology here with your customer, right? We want to make sure that we're not giving an allowance amount that seems astronomical because the first thing that they're going to do when they see an allowance is they're going to go onto homedepot.com. They're going to go on to maybe looking at Hayward products, or they're going to be looking at Amazon. Who knows? They're going to be researching and saying, is this realistic? Right? And so if you give an allowance for the highest end product, that might feel really unrealistic for your customer. And now you're losing trust with them. Okay. And so I highly recommend setting the allowance amount as the like mid product quality. So they can choose something that's cheaper, sure, if they want to. But if you tell them that all of the allowance amounts are for a middle grade product, then they can at least feel comfortable and pretty confident in the fact that you've thought about what you're presenting to them. You're not trying to gouge them and you're not losing trust, right? And then that's also why you still give them the option to select something that's over the allowance amount so that they can have that freedom, but it's a decision that they're making and they're not feeling like you're making it for them. So that was a really great question. For contingencies, again, I really like when you kind of set a contingency that's an allowance amount, or you can just call it an allowance for the customer, and have a very, very great clause in your contract that explains that contingency so that they know exactly what it would be used for. Give examples, give parameters to that so that they don't think that you're just going to dip into contingencies funds for part of the project itself. And then also tell them exactly how they're going to receive that money back, or that you're not going to invoice them for the contingency amount until the end of the project. So give those very strict guidelines for them so that they know that it's a process for you. It's not just a line that you tacked onto your proposal. And as far as the amount goes, again, it's typically between that 5 to 15%, but I would say look back at your prior projects, compare the estimate versus actuals there, and see where you're kind of falling on your past projects, especially the past three. Are we finding that we are, when unexpected stuff happens, that's typically dipping in about 7% into every project? Okay, well, that's good to know. So then maybe set your contingency allowance amount to 10%, and so that you can keep a happy customer in the end. Customers will get freaked out if you bring up a change order or something massive to them and they're like, what? We didn't plan for this. All customers want is planning, and they want transparency, and they don't want surprises. So if you can reduce that on the front end, then that can help significantly. Great question. And then the next thing that I want to talk about is complexity multipliers. And we're going to spend quite a bit of time on this because, especially in the pool building world, there are so many choices and so many options that you can dip into with the complexity of the project.
Well, if it's complicated, then there are three more questions that we should ask before we get into that, if that's okay.
Awesome.
Okay, the first thing is, what is your theory about deduct allowances? For instance, price it at the top and then offer value engineering ways to decrease to that amount.
I think that it could work. Now, I haven't quite seen that in practice very often. And so, again, I think you have to consider from the consumer perspective. And so for me, I would rather build. If I'm working with a contractor, I'd rather feel a bit more in control. Sometimes that can come across as kind of sneaky, if you will. And so if you're offering like the highest amount and you're saying, hey, but we can reduce it if we do this, we can reduce it if we do that, that can feel kind of sneaky to customers. And so really consider like their psychology through this. The entire time that you're working with a customer or a lead in this case, you're going to be trying to build trust with them. So if there's anything possible that can make them feel like they can't trust you, you're gone. So I like the idea of rather giving them the ability to upsell themselves, and then it feels like they're more in control of it. You can use software tools so that they can upsell themselves from their own living room, and that's where their real number comes out, is typically with their, let's say, their spouse, and they're actually talking about their budget. They're never going to tell you their real budget. So this way, they can then determine that for themselves and they feel like they're in the driver's seat. Don't take that control away from your customers. Keep them in that driver's seat, or at least help them believe that they are.
Yeah, I know in the commercial space, architects and engineers make a lot of these selections, and then the owner gets to look at it, and then they have to come up with value engineering. So it's probably a little bit different when you're dealing directly with owners, which segues into the next question. This comes from Janine. Shouldn't all material selections be made before the quote is created? Because they affect construction methods too.
I love that question. I actually have an entire section on selections processes. So, yes, let's dig into that very soon.
Okay, great. And then the third question is, how do you deal with adding margin when a project goes over an allowance? When do you not typically reveal your margin to the client? So
Mm.
yeah, but did that make sense? Like it's kind of worded
Yeah.
strange, or I can't read. It's one or the other. We're not sure. But yeah,
No,
that
I
comes
think
from
I
James.
think I understand what they're getting at here. And you're right. There's an element of this where your customer may discover your allow or your margin amount. Oh no, right? Where yeah, you're tacking on a percentage to a single item or a single even change order. Like they're going to be able to do reverse math and find out your margins. So if you're trying to be sneaky around that, don't. In many cases, the customer understanding your margins is okay. And if you build trust with them and educate them, and we'll talk more about that very soon, then they're going to see enough value in what you have to deliver where them knowing your margin should not be a problem. So the goal here is for sure, you don't have to like tell them straight out, our margin is 30% or 20%, but rather if they calculate it, it shouldn't be a big deal for you if we do everything else right. So I can show you in JobTread, we have the ability to set an allowance as a cost and fee allowance, which allows you to collect your margin on top of it. That's great. And so you can do it really easily in a software system. But if you wanted to do it yourself, sure, calculate it, add to it. But I would highly, highly, highly recommend making sure that you outline in your contract that any overages on allowances will incur an additional margin on top of it or an additional fee.
Okay, you got through them. Proceed.
Okay, here we go. Great. So let's get on to these complexity multipliers here. So those are essentially adjustments that you can apply to your estimate to account for the increased coordination, risk, or any inefficiency that comes with a more complex project. Let's dig into this just a little bit further. So most builders treat complexity as this job is just like a little bit harder, or sure, they want this and this. I'm just going to stack the costs and we'll be good. That's not necessarily how it works. As we all know, more complex projects mean that it really changes how the entire project will work together. So it actually will multiply the complexity of the project rather than just add to it. So it's really important that we don't think about increasing our cost in a linear way, but rather in a multiplying or multiplistic way. So here you're going to see kind of this graph, and this is showing the typical estimate that someone will build. So as the project complexity increases, they'll just add the other components to the project. But what we're finding is that the reality is that this becomes a huge swing here, where as the complexity increases, so much more time and effort and resources from your company are being used now. And so now you have some lost margin in there. You're not able to make up for the complexity with your overhead anymore. And so this is really important to consider, especially as we have examples like let's say that your customer wants multiple equipment pads. Okay, maybe the standard is one, and now they want 2 to 3 pads across the property because they are adding the heating elements to the pool and such. So this is going to be adding not only plumbing runs, electrical coordination, and you name it, but also it's going to be adding a bunch more coordination time. It's going to be increasing the error risk for the systems, and it's going to lead to probably a lot more site visits and even warranty issues in the future. So that added complexity is now multiplying the complexity of the project. Another example here is like a tight access backyard. So let's say that they have a fence around their property and it's really tough to get into that fence. Or some of these homes are built so close to each other where you can't get heavy equipment between those homes to the backyard. Well, not only is this causing you to rent different equipment to now move soil out of the backyard as you're digging, it's going to cause more runs for your employees or maybe the subcontractor, or it's going to result in you taking longer time to dig out that pool in the backyard. So it's important that we now are considering these additional factors. It's not just a one for one. You actually have to multiply that complexity quite a bit. I also like this example of like high-end finishes or high-end materials. Let's say that the customer, your estimate typically includes a standard tile for the pool. And your customer finds this really expensive, really cool tile that they want to use, and it's glass tile, and it's such a cool effect in the pool. That's all great and dandy. It's not a matter of just switching out that tile. Now the labor time has increased, not only because maybe the tile pieces are smaller, but because now you can see through those glass pieces, right? So everything behind that tile has to be pristine and perfect before you can install the tile. Otherwise, it's going to look terrible. And so there's so many more factors involved with this one decision that a customer is making to add complexity to the project, where we have to make sure that we account for those decisions throughout our estimating process. So a couple fixes and a couple ideas that I have are, one is, of course, adding those strict contingencies. You can eat into contingency budget if a customer makes a choice that's now going to need a bit more complexity to consider. Also, you can apply a percentage adjustment to the margin of the whole project to account for labor, risk, and coordination based on the difficulty level. In JobTread, you have the ability to add a parameter. And so you can say complexity, low, medium, or high. And if you say high, you can have formulas automatically increase the price of the project based on the complexity of the project. There's also an ability to have separate budget templates. So maybe you have a budget template for a standard pool build, and that's low complexity. Copy that, add to it, and now create a budget template for medium complexity and high complexity, and so on.
Um, Dr. Anna here. We have a question, and I'd actually, are you still looking at the graph? Because that's what we're seeing.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, good. Because you were saying a lot of things that are not on this graph. I just wanted to, maybe you had changed
Yeah.
screens. Okay, so Liliana has a question, and
Hi,
her
Liliana.
question her question is, will you apply the complexity multiplier to the whole project or the stage that represents the complexity? And what is a good factor?
That's a really good question. I think that there are multiple ways you can cut this cake, right? Where you can apply it to the overall project, that's fine. You can also apply it to a specific phase of the project, or you can even just apply it to all your labor items. For example, Or you can tack on additional items so it's clear to the customer that this choice they made is going to actually require more processing time, administrative work, and so on. So you have a lot of options here. And the percentage, again, I would say is going to be based on the choices that they're making. And that's not something that we can just say blanket across the board, add 3% because the complexity is higher. Sure, we can do that for some things, like with my example of changing the complexity from low, mid to high and just tack on a percentage overall. Sure, just make sure that percentage is high enough where you're going to be factoring everything into it. But if it's just adding a single portion to the overall scope of the project, you might just want to factor it into that one additional portion. Let's say they add a spa, right? So maybe it's not that you want to apply that all across the whole budget, but for that spa, you want to make sure that the complexity is accounted for there. It's really kind of, again, it's up to you. This is going to be a decision that you're going to have to make, but where you're going to derive your answer for this question is going to be based on your previous projects. Look at those previous projects, look at the estimate versus actual, look at the schedule, see how many days have adjusted from the baseline of your schedule because of the complexity levels, and then you can garner a pretty decent idea of how you need to increase it. But every pool builder is so different, and the scale on which you build pools is different. But what I will say is the larger the pool project, the complexity multiplier is even more impactful. So keep that in mind for sure. I wish I could just give you a single answer, but it doesn't always work that way. All right. And then the fourth mistake that I often see contractors make, and this is what we alluded to earlier, is an unclear selections process. So selections are a financial system. It's not a design detail. You have to view selections as a financial decision-making process with your customer. And the lack of these systems can really put a strain on your resources. So I interviewed tons of JobTread contractors to try to understand their selection processes, and I tried to map them out for every single one. Gosh, I interviewed over 50 of our contractors independently and mapped their selections processes. And I will tell you, everybody thought that they do selections the same way, but no one handled selections the same way. So everybody has kind of made up their own selection process. And in some cases, it works really well. In other cases, it could be optimized, and that's great. But what I really found that it boiled down to were the when, who, and how the selections were delivered. So when, that's the biggest question. When are your customers making their selection decisions? Are your customers making their selection decisions pre-contract, maybe during the design phase? Great. Then you get those out of the way and you can move forward with the contract. I think that that's probably what a lot of contractors wish was the reality. That may not always be true. I have seen a lot of contractors who try to do everything pre-contract, but then they're like, we've been just spending so much time with this customer where we just need them to sign a contract so we can start, and then they can make other decisions later. So I have seen some that do pre-contract selections as well as post-contract selections, and therefore they'll put allowances in their contract, and then the customer can make those decisions against the allowance amount. So you could kind of do both, and you could do one or the other. And then the other option is to add on some selections on the contract itself. And I'll show you what that might look like in just a moment. If you add on the options on the contract itself, I'd say that's great for like a couple upgrades. With pool builds, there's maybe even hundreds of selections your customers have to make. So I may not put them all on the contract itself, but there is an option to do that. And it's a great opportunity for upselling. But really put that thinking cap on and try to figure out when is the best time for our customers to make these selection decisions. Then you need to decide who is in charge. Who's in charge of making sure that the customer makes their selections, holding them accountable to their deadlines, and who is going to be responsible for enforcing all of the selections process. Now, I also am a huge believer in give your customers a fee or something if they go past a selections deadline. Make sure that they know that anytime that they drag their feet, it's going to eat into the cost of the project. So that's your time, that's your team's time, even your team following up with them, those minutes add up. So keep your customer on track with the selections process. And then also, how do you offer selections to your customers? Some of you want to offer predefined selections to your customers. So in like a good, better, best format, for example. And that's kind of dictated or kind of shown on this screen here, where your customer has specific options they can choose from. Others of you, you might have a showroom that your customer comes to, or you might want to show them samples, and then you're just logging what they choose on the spot with you. That's great too. Another option is for you to let the customer source their items themselves, or you say, hey, go meet with this vendor and tell me what you pick. So that's more where the customer is driving the experience. I would say that the best way to get your selections done on time is going to be predefined selections or in-person selections in a showroom. That's where you can actually get your customers to make their decisions and you can move on. Anytime you let your customer go explore on their own and pick something and tell you what they want, that's when you're going to be opening up a room for issues and they will drag their feet. Pinterest is something that keeps them up all night, and everybody thinks that they are a designer. And so they will take a lot more time if you're letting them do it on their own. So, worst case scenario, give them some options and then say, if you find something else, tell us, but these are what we recommend. And most of the time, they will pick the middle option. That is what psychology shows. And so, really be considering that when you're giving them a good, better, best. The better is typically what they will go after. And they may talk themselves up to a best on some things, but usually stick to the better or the second option. So, that's again something to keep in mind as you're giving these options to your customer. And I would often say if you're giving them an allowance, then base the allowance on that middle option for sure. Additionally, one thing to really consider, and this was brought up earlier, when selections happen too late, then customers may upgrade their materials and that adds that complexity to your job. And so now you're not only just having them choose a selection item, but you're also having to think about how that impacts the overall project. So one way that you can account for this is within a selection item, you can then break it down for labor and materials and complexity even, and have multiple cost items make up that selection so that you're accounting for it and for like the increased complexity for each choice. So something really to keep in mind because with selections done after contract, it can really eat into your profits if you don't do it right. All right. So we also have to think, oh, go ahead. I'm going to pause.
Yeah, you'd better because we've got more questions.
Yay.
So,
Okay.
Andre or Andres asked, in regard to selections, for example, plaster selections, let's say I'm estimated 60 bags, but I have
Mhm.
a selection for colors. How can I have the dollar amount shown to be the total for all 60 bags versus the cost of each one?
So this sounds like is this a specific question? Are you a JobTread user? That would be my biggest
Well,
question here.
I'll tell you what, actually, Rachel just responded. So,
Okay.
Rachel's, I think, going to handle that one. Maybe
Okay,
that
good. It sounds like that's a
requires.
specific question within JobTread, and we can definitely help you work through that.
Okay, awesome. And then there's a pretty funny one. How about a difficult customer multiplier?
Ah, that's kind of why I mentioned earlier, complexity based on the materials, the scope of the project, or the customer. It is true. And some customers require a lot more out of you than other customers.
Yeah,
So, what I would recommend for handling that is give your customer a system. Many
okay.
customers just think that you are on speed dial and that they can contact you for every little thing that they observe. And in fact, they probably work from home and they're watching everything your team does.
Yeah,
So, I highly recommend giving your customer a manual. Tell them exactly how you want them to contact you and tell them when you want them to contact you. Say, hey, I meet with my team every morning. So if you get your feedback to me by the night before, I will review it with my team the next morning.
nice.
Also, in JobTread, for example, in the customer portal, you can let your customers submit daily logs even. So then that again gives your customer a direct place where they can tell you how they feel and what's going on, but you look at it when you're ready and it's not blowing up your phone. So give your customer a process. Customers will thrive with processes. Trust me.
Okay, cool. There's two more. First of all, Sean, I'm unable to unmute you, so you need to type your question and we will see it. And then Pierce asks, can you build out a selection process as shown on the screen in JobTread?
Yes, you can. And I'm going to show you that here. I'm actually going to do a bit of
Beautiful.
a live demo for y'all toward the end. So we'll
Okay,
definitely
I
do
will get
that.
out of the way. Proceed. Sorry.
Sounds good. No, you're good. All right. So we thought about selections. Now we also have to think about how to present our estimates to our customers. So that is one of the other mistakes I see is poor proposals. So sure, we've accounted for all of our costs, but that also means that we may not beat out our competitors just based on price of the project, right? So we need to rely on other things. And your main point of communication with your customer at this point, or your lead, is your proposal. So your proposal needs to be professional and it is going to be a reflective or a reflection of your work. So if your proposal looks haphazard, if it looks like you threw it together or that it looks incomplete, that's going to translate to your projects being haphazard and incomplete in your customer's mind. Your proposal is your customer's first impression of you. Also, you have to choose the appropriate level of detail to include in your proposal. What numbers do you want to show to your customer versus what numbers do you want to hide from your customer? Like I said earlier, you shouldn't be fearful of your customer figuring out your margin. That should not be a concern of yours because you should be able to overcome that in other ways. But also, this has to do with the text that you include on your proposal, the level of detail when you're describing the scope of work. Break it up, make it very clear to your customer what is happening during each phase of the project rather than a giant block of text at the top of the proposal. Help the customer walk through it. Think of it as you're reading a story to your customer. How would you want your customers to digest that story? Additionally, be very clear with your customers because proposals are meant to set expectations with your customers. So make sure that you're clear about everything that's going to happen during the project, help them understand the mess that their backyard is going to be, and try not to stick super vague with this because vagueness does increase objections, it does mislead customers and make them not trust you as much. But too text heavy is going to now cause confusion. So you have to find that middle ground here where it's structured. It connects the value that you have to offer to the price of the contract and it ensures clarity for the customer. You can also level up your proposals, add a cover page, add some footer pages as well to help the customer understand that you care about the details. This isn't just numbers for you. You want to make sure that you're presenting it well to them. Also, you can add visuals. You can put photos throughout the entire proposal. You could even add videos throughout the proposal. This proposal is your one opportunity to build trust with your customer and help them understand that you're going to walk them through the process. So position yourself as an educator. You're teaching your customer what to expect. You're helping them understand the essential components of a pool build project, and you're going to be teaching them throughout the whole project. Sometimes customers' biggest fear is that the contractor is going to screw them over. So show them that you're not going to do that and that you're going to be sitting right beside them the whole journey. And you can communicate that through the proposal by offering those photos, the visuals, the videos throughout so that they feel like you're a team player here. So once we get that job sold, there are some unforeseen circumstances that can come up. So when I've asked contractors, hey, how do you handle unexpected issues in the jobs, like when the job's going on? And usually their answer is pretty vague. They usually will say something like, oh yeah, sometimes we do change orders depending on the issue. And then I ask how the customer responds to those change orders. And they chuckle. And oftentimes they'll shake their head and be like, I mean, they don't like it, right? And so it's really important that we really create a process for handling unexpected things. We can't estimate for surprises, but we can estimate how to handle them. So this is our opportunity to set a process in place so that your customer knows what to expect here. If you went into the wilderness with a first aid kit, you at least have some assurance that that first aid kit is going to guide you when you need it, right? And if you get injured in the wilderness and you don't have a first aid kit, you go into an emotional state of panic. And so that's what we don't want our customers to do. We don't want them to be panicking, and we don't want our team to panic when something comes up, because then we're starting to make emotional decisions. And that's the last thing you want happening on the job. So whenever something unexpected happens, contractors usually respond in one of two ways. They either freeze, they'll halt all project productivity for, let's say, 3 weeks until they figure out a nice engineered solution. And meanwhile, your overhead is being dipped into because you have you have your team sitting idle for those 3 weeks. The other option is that you're misplacing your sense of guilt and you start to eat those costs because you feel bad for the customer. And so it's important that we're not dipping into one of these freeze or guilt phases because that's an emotional response. Rather, let's create a system so that we can rely on that instead. So start to think about who has to be involved when unexpected happens and who can approve any movement that we make as a result of these unexpected things. The goal is to reduce the reactive panic and then to really help us to have very sound decision making through that process. So this is an example on the screen of how you can create a decision tree for your company. When unexpected happens, how are we making decisions on how to handle this? This is helpful because then your entire company is on the same page. But even better, communicate this to the customer. Show them that you have this flow chart or this decision tree and say, hey, if something comes up, what we're going to do is we're going to immediately stop the work and look at this decision tree. We're going to assess the structural cost to fix this. We're going to see if this is part of our original scope or if it's more covered by that contingency. And then if not, then if it could be a major issue and we can then pivot and look at a change order. This clarity for your customer, again, is another opportunity to increase trust with them so that they now understand what's going to happen. I know that when I have contractors at my house and I'm at work all day, I'm like scared as to what's happening at home because I don't know what their process is if unexpected things come up. And I don't always want them making decisions on their own. I want them to reach out to me, but I don't know if they will, right? So this is your opportunity to kind of put the customer at ease, but also explain that pool construction is never a linear process. And so we need to make sure that we handle it the right way. This also gives us the opportunity to look at our job costs at this time, and then we can course correct if needed. So having real job costs, tracking your expenses in real time will only inform this more. So speaking of unpredictability, sometimes we pass along those risks to our subcontractors or our trade partners, and we're thinking that it's actually going to save us money or save us that risk. But in reality, using these trade partners is just shifting the labor. It still doesn't shift managing the project. So while you might think that a fixed contract with a subcontractor, let's say for $5,000, that might be all that it takes, great, they'll do the work, we'll be good. That's actually not the case. There's a ton of invisible management work that happens when you're using trade partners or subcontractors. So you need to account for that in your estimating as well. How much does it cost you to have direct supervision and site prep for your subcontractors? How much does it cost you to coordinate the trades? When one trade is delayed, now you have to coordinate with the other trades and adjust as you move forward. Also, let's say that a trade shows up and something's not done, like the trench isn't dug yet and they need to now do their electrical. Well, now you're trying to figure out how do we get this trench dug. Maybe your team starts doing it just to get it done. That's more time and more labor for your team. And now again, you're eating into those profits. So how do you coordinate those trades effectively? And that does take time. It takes management. Rework and cleanup. If you need to rework something with the trade, if they left the job site completing their work, but what they left behind is impacting everyone else, well, now that falls on you as well. And then lastly, that part of that 90% hidden responsibility is scheduling inefficiencies and any cascading work adjustments that need to take place. So while it might seem great to work with trade contractors, make sure that any margin that you add on top of their bid that comes in is accounting for all the management pieces that you need to be mindful of as you work with them. All right. The fix, I would say, is again, acknowledge and account for your role. Make sure that that's baked into your cost. And then lastly, use those purchase orders, use work orders with your contractors. Make sure that you iron out exactly what you expect of them. And so that they know that unless they complete the work and complete it right, that they're not going to be getting paid. That also gives them a contract to then follow up. I don't know how many contractors I can tell you have never touched a purchase order or work order with their subs ever. And that's your opportunity to do a contract, to do all these contracts with your customers, but where are your contracts with your trade partners? Make sure that you get those work orders and purchase orders down with your contractors so that they can have the same expectations as you and you're moving forward in a much smoother way. All right, and lastly, the last mistake that I've seen contractors do is getting stuck in this continuous cycle of rinse and repeat. So most builders really don't track their actual financial project costs in a clean way that lets them look back at them and course correct moving forward. And so the lack of performance review kind of puts you in a state of confidence without data. You're like, yeah, we build pools, we do great, but then you're crossing your fingers through the project, hoping that everything's going to be okay. That shouldn't be the case. You should have the data that backs up the fact that you're a good pool builder and that you can keep your profits. So we want to make sure that we're leveraging our data to uncover those actionable insights. And then we need to use that data to adjust our templates moving forward. Understand how your jobs are performing relative to your budget and your expectations. Yes, look at your past jobs and make decisions accordingly. Identify your customers and job types with the highest and lowest margins. Don't go into neighborhoods and do pools if those neighborhoods are always giving you the lowest margins or you're running into issues because they've built a brand new development on top of old structure, right? So there's a lot to really be mindful of here so that you can course correct before it's too late. And lastly, just I'm going to leave you with this. If you don't measure it, you're going to repeat it. So make sure that you're getting these numbers into your project so that you actually can look back and make a healthy assessment. So we've covered a lot of mistakes, but the main goal is to switch your business from guessing to systemizing. So this is just a brief overview of what we discussed so that you can kind of see what kind of builder you want to be. Do you want to be that average builder that's kind of flying by the seat of their pants, or do you want to be that better builder that's able to be proactive and that's correcting their projects as they move forward? So I don't have a ton of time left, but I want to make sure that I get into showing you how this can actually work in practice. So I'm going to pop into JobTread here. This is a construction management platform, and this is what I get to teach every day. But the nice part about JobTread is that it's a one-stop shop. And so whether it's JobTread or another software system that you're using, definitely try to garner as much insight out of it as you can and try to find ways that you can make your estimating process repeatable, but also able to handle any issues that arise. So here in my JobTread account, I have my main dashboard. I can create as many custom dashboards as I need to here. So again, we can course correct for future projects. I also have all of my jobs listed here. And so I'm going to go into a very simple pool build first. So we'll pop into this pool build. I haven't really done much on this job yet, so I want to create my estimate now. So I'll go to my budget, and now you'll see it's empty. The nice thing about using a system like this is that you can leverage templates. So I will add a template here. Awesome. So here's a template for my standard pool build. It's pretty simple. I like to keep this one nice and simple. You can get as complex as you need to as well, but that looks good to me. Now, remember, that's that stage one. That is where we're adding the structure. This is a basic template. Next, we're going to look at our core scope. So for any particular project, maybe we need to switch things out, add some additional items here. And so we even have this notion of the global catalog. This is where we do have Pool Corp. Heritage is on its way here very soon. And when we are searching their catalog, we can then search for all of their products. Right here in JobTread, what this is doing is it's scraping the Pool Corp inventory, and we're able to add items directly from their catalog into our own job budgets. Then we can even order the products directly through JobTread as well. So here's where you can select as many of these additional products as you'd like to and add them right to your budget. So that's where we're customizing now a bit of this proposal. Then we can go into that phase 3 where we're doing site adjustments. So maybe for this particular project, they have a perimeter fence that we are going to need to take down. So you can even kind of cherry pick different cost groups to make sure that those specific costs for that one project are factored in. And then we don't just eat the costs of adjusting the fence, right? Okay. That looks good. And then also maybe I want to go into the risk and contingency portion. I'm actually going to pop this up here, adjust it a little bit. All right, so you do have the option to select maybe just a specific group or your whole entire budget altogether, and you can use what are called mass actions. And this is where you can adjust your margins if you need to. So right now, my margins on these are 30%, but maybe because of the complexity of the project and specifically the equipment area, I'm going to bump that up just to make sure that my team is set and I'm not losing any profits there. Perfect. So there are ways that using software can speed up your estimating process, but you're still going through all of those stages of estimating and getting more and more detailed for this particular project. Now, of course, I can then create my proposal nice and easy. So by choosing to create a document, we're now selecting all of the items from our budget that we want to include on there, and then we can create them. Perfect. So here you'll even see I've jazzed up my proposal with a cover page. I even have all of my cost items listed out, and I can choose the level of detail that I'd like to show. I also think it's really helpful to have that scope of work in every single section for my customer. And then I even have some selections directly on my proposal. So I have the ability to upsell my customer directly on here. And when my customer makes those selections, then they are in the driver's seat and they're interacting with the proposal now. So here they can choose. And then I also have terms and conditions or my contract language. And then we have e-signatures to help get those contracts signed nice and quick and conveniently with your customer.
Awesome. Anything else you want to pack in here? Because we are almost out of time.
I know. Okay, the last thing that I just wanted to show, because I told you I would be the selections. So here's where you can create your selections. You can create them one by one, or I will just import a bunch directly from my catalog. And again, once you have all of these set up, it's nice and easy to then be able to create them, send them out to the customer, and now your customer can make their choices directly in their portal. So it's bringing your entire estimating process all together into one place. So the last thing that I just want to end on is I was going to talk a little about AI. Don't you worry, that is always a part of the conversation, but I have to leave you with some homework. So I'm an educator. These are the 3 things that I think that you should do after this webinar this week sometime is to review the estimate versus actuals for 3 of your jobs. Make sure that you identify at least one gap or oversight that you can adjust and correct, and then implement it. Take your team also along with you through this journey, and that will help you all move in the right direction and hopefully tighten up those estimates.
Awesome. Dr. Hunter, thank you so much for doing this. And thank you all for attending. This, I got to be honest, was way more people than I was expecting. We had just relaunched this. So we hope to see you again next week and the weeks to follow. We are trying to fill out this summer program so you can get value each week. Now I'm going to give Anna some homework. Once we are done here, I'm going to send the email list of all of you who attended. And Anna, you need to send them some information if they want to follow up, if they want a demo or anything like this. Make sure that people have access to get this information. Is that okay with you?
That works perfectly. And if you all have any additional questions, we are here. We're ready to answer them. Just email training@jobtread.com.
Training@jobtread.com.
Yes.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great week. Have a great season. Build some amazing pools, service pools, whatever it is you do. Watershape University is here to help you achieve mastery. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.